All right, I guess we'll get this one rocking and rolling. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Todd.
Okay, thank you. So greetings, everyone. So this is the State Building Code Council combined IBC tag and IFC tag. And if you were just listening in, but for the recording, we're trying to get quorum for both tags so that we can make a just bring the recommendations together for the full council meeting on Friday. So if with that, let's see if we can get quorum, please.
All right. First, I'm going to do a roll call of the building code tag. So, Todd Baberther,
Here.
Charles Calvano,
Here.
Susan Kaufman, Sean Carlstrom,
Here.
Bill Mabush,
Present.
Corey Thomas,
Here.
Chris Seaman, Will Rodriguez, Andrea Smith, Dave Germer, Roger Heringa.
He will be late. He will join by his phone in 15 minutes.
Okay.
Chris Seaman is coming on right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Michael Barth,
Yes, I'm here.
Alan Spalding, Adam Phillips. And then I got one more for Mark Sniffen as an alternate for the building official. All right.
I see Mark there, but
Yeah, he's here.
Okay. I'll mark him in there.
okay. Do you want to cycle through the IFC
Yeah.
tag? Okay.
So for the IFC tag, I've got Tony Doan as the chair.
Tony, I think he declined it. He won't be here.
Okay. Zach Tuck. Quinn Ty.
Present.
Corey Thomas. See him, and he was here for the other one. Ken Brulette.
Here.
Mike Six. Dave Colcott.
Present.
Chris Seaman is here. Ricky Campbell.
Here.
Roger Heringa.
Here.
Kevin Marr. Paul Clark. Al Spalding.
Present.
All right, I believe we are a little shy on a quorum for the building.
Is
This
that
is Mark,
true with Roger here also?
Roger here, yeah.
and this is Mark Sniffen. I didn't check in, but I'm here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Dustin, Zach Duck here as well.
Sue Kaufman here, just checking in.
Okay, I think we have a quorum for both of these groups now.
For both, good. Okay, thank you, Dustin. Well, and thank you, everyone. Again, appreciate the time. If you weren't listening into the BFP last Friday, we didn't have quorum, but we also, I would have probably recommended that we just quickly touch base and remand it back one more time to make sure that the IBC and the IFC tags are either kind of united and have consensus on the recommendation going forward, or with at least discuss whether two versions would move forward for the council then to take action. So Stoyan, maybe you want to give a little more commentary, is that best?
Well, I don't want to get into too many details because we have enough TAC members here, but there was a decision by the IBC TAC, and again, for the fire code TAC, Ken raised a concern that wasn't discussed at the IBC technical advisory group, and he has a proposal. There were two different recommendations from the fire code TAC and the building code TAC. Again, the BFP committee, we were unlucky and we didn't have the quorum. So the question is how we will introduce this before the council members. So two different approaches, or one recommendation made by both technical advisory groups. The important part in this case is that Washington State is kind of unique state, because when we have conflicts between different codes, it's not the more stringent requirement. There is a list, and the first in place is the building code, and the fire code is in the fourth place. So if there are differences, then the building code would apply if there are conflicts between these two codes. So this all I can say. The best case scenario is both technical advisory groups end up with the same recommendation.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, oh, sorry, Dave, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay, I was just going to reiterate that how we got here was, if you remember, about 2 weeks ago, we ran an IBC tag meeting with quorum and invited the IFC. Obviously, that's how we jointly did this, but it wasn't an official IFC tag meeting. IFC met the next week, proposed an amendment or a change, and we just want to bring that together. So you call it conflict, but really it was kind of an amendment, I believe, right? In addition, that we just want to circle back with the IBC tag. And since we have quorum on both, that's the idea. So with that, well, first of all, let me get to the agenda here. Anyone on agenda item 1, now we're doing quorum, anyone else from the public has to be recognized for the meeting?
This is Ron right here.
Yep, greetings, Ron.
Ardell
Ardell.
Jalla, building official for SDCI,
Thank you,
City of
Ardell.
Seattle.
Anyone else?
Micah Chappelle, residential tag chair and SBCC member representing code officials.
Thank you, Micah.
Yeah, Tom Handy, Wasatch representative on the council.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Tom. Okay, hearing no others, then we'll move on to agenda item 2 is to review and approve this agenda. Can I hear a motion to approve, please?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Dave.
This is Al. I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, so approved, and then into item 3, which is a discussion. Anyone, and again, we'll run this as we do with most tags as a very open meeting, so including members of the public. Let's put our hands up when we want to discuss, but I'll open it up, especially anyone who's on both tags, just to give a little more commentary, especially from the fire side, so those of us on the building tag can kind of get up to speed. No? There we go. Ken then Ardell, please.
Stoyan, can you bring up the proposal that you said I had? So what I had brought up at the last tag meeting was with regards to condition 2 definitions, where it talks about requires limited verbal or physical assistance, and not knowing what that meant. Concerned that without a definition, it would be very hard to stipulate, are you a condition 1 or condition 2? worried about after facilities are licensed and occupied that they might change between condition 1 and condition 2, and how is that defined? So there was a code change, I believe it's G5-21, that went through the ICC process, and I brought it up as a proposal for this tag to include it in our definitions in the building code, in the fire code. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Ardell, go ahead, sorry.
Thanks. I just wanted to, I guess, before we move on, did you want to, are there any comments on Ken's, or do you want me to go ahead into a new topic?
Oh, let's close that out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got distracted there. Ron, on that topic? Yeah.
On that topic, this particular provision that's being proposed applies to both the R occupancies and the I occupancies. And I would question why this particular provision is being included in the adoption of the R4 when it applies to both R4 and I1. And it appears to me to be an interpretation of base code language that should be completely separate from the point or the motion before us, which is the R4 occupancy. Granted, this is an element of interpretation, but it's for both the I and the R4. And so is this going to be addressed by applicants looking for clarification in an I occupancy situation? And I guess my point would be that it doesn't belong in the R4 adoption.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Al, do you want to respond to that?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. I was just curious if we could take a look at the proposed language for the definitions, because I don't see it here, unless is it highlighted in yellow?
It's highlighted, yes, right there.
You know, and as we go through this, I want to ask, because I wasn't able to join the IFC tag, just get feedback on if we actually feel there's conflict here. I heard a little bit from Ron there, but again, how would we frame that to the council if there is? So go ahead, Al and Micah.
Go ahead, Micah. I'm still reading.
Oh, okay. No worries, Al. Thank you. I just wanted to point, if I believe correctly, the fire code tag did vote to approve this definition. And where this definition comes from was actually John Williams, who is part of the Department of Health for us and is on the healthcare committee for ICC. So that language, it's not something that's an anomaly. It is coming from Department of Health, and the fire tag, if I remember correctly, did vote to include this, and that's why it's coming back for a combined tag, because the BFP didn't have a quorum to, solve the answer here. Who needs to look at what? So that's why we're back here looking at it, among other items that were not discussed at the BFP that I think will have added topics later. Thanks.
And Micah, just for history here, is just this information wasn't available during the IBC? I don't remember, or was introduced after?
I unfortunately missed that meeting as well. I just, have limited time. I can't always attend every special meeting we have, unfortunately, so I don't have an answer, Todd.
It was introduced after the IBC tag made the decision.
Just additional information. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, why don't you go? Chris, I think you were here for both.
I was here for both. Probably the reason why it got introduced later is the IFC tag is just really good. No, so we just caught it. It came up and it makes total sense. I think I want to speak directly to the comments that it's outside the scope of what we were trying to do here. So I think it's totally within the scope of what we were asked to do. If we're going to adopt as a state an occupancy type that we have not had in our code for the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years, right? So we need to support our AHJs and our design professionals as best we can so that the code can be applied correctly. So as a state, the DOH, the proponent of the code change that's going into the 2024, thought that this was necessary language for people to understand how to apply the code. And so did apparently the majority of people that voted on it. So I think it's totally within the scope of what we're doing here, even though it does also apply to I2. It's difficult to apply R4 without that language defined.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's helpful. So Gwen, then Dave. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
then Ron, then Dave.
So yeah, Quinn here. So just a little bit more clarification. This language is approved for the 2024 cycle. So what we're doing is we're actually adopting it early. So even if, let's say, we don't adopt it now, it is going to be in effect for the 2024 cycle. So it's one of those things where we're just staying ahead of the curve.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Quinn, and Ken? Is it in IBC? It seems like what Dustin was showing on the screen. It's in the IBC.
It is. Yeah,
Is
it was proposed under the G section. So it is an IBC, a change.
2024 IBC.
2024, correct.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ron, and then Dave.
Well, my point in response to the notion that the R4 code is not a one-off new code that's coming out of the blue that has never been reviewed. The difference between the R4 and the I1 is just the number of occupants being served. And so the notion that this is a strange new world for jurisdictions, I don't believe should be characterized that way, because it really is, and the commentary states this, is that the primary difference here is basically the number of occupants. These particular codes have already been reviewed and looked at many times by many jurisdictions. And I just question how this particular provision can be added as a base code interpretation within an R4 approval, when it actually, even in the proposal to the ICC, states R4/I1. I mean, this is an I1 issue just as much as it is R4. And it really, to have it be included within the R4 adoption, it should be R4 plus I1 interpretation as the adoption rather than R4. I just believe that this is a base code language interpretation that should be separately identified and found and searchable with relationship to this definition and not included within the R4. But again, I don't want to keep repeating, so I'll push it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Dave?
Yeah, it's some interesting points about this, because I didn't vote for it because I was the chair for the fire tag, but had I been able to vote, I would have voted for this. I kind of understand where you're coming from, Ron, but the concern that I have is we're going to be putting in an occupancy type that we haven't had in the past, and the code people are going to have to interpret this language and understand what it is. They've been doing with I4s. Now they're going to be looking at the I1s. Now they're going to look at the R4s, and they're going to get some confusion with this. And what this code does is it clarifies. All we're doing is adding definitions of terminology that's in the existing code. It's providing a clarification for it. I think that's a benefit to the code officials to be able to have a better understanding and be more consistent. Because I think what we're going to find out, or what we would find out, is that it's very inconsistently applied across the state. So this provides a good basis of making things consistent. I recommend that the building tag take that into consideration and approve this modified change.
Thank you, Dave. Let's go, Dustin.
I just had a quick question for staff, so I'm clear on what our direction would be. Are we talking about making this change in both the IBC and the IFC? Because that's kind of what I gathered as the spirit of what we're talking about, but I haven't heard specifically if this will be a change just in the IBC per this proposal G521, or we're looking at making them mirror each other.
Go ahead if anyone has the answer to that before we move on.
And I would
Yeah, that
assume
would be
that
the
we're doing.
idea, is to add the definition to both. Because
Okay.
both need it.
But are we seeing that oh, I do see it now. No, yeah, okay, I see it both in the 2020. Got it. In our packet today is listed in both, right?
Yeah, that's how we have it drafted in today's version.
Okay.
It's listed, if I can provide a little bit more clarity. So it's listed in bold because it was mentioned that it was approved for 2024 fire code and building code, and this is why I asked. So when we got this G521, we saw it was in the building code, so we got a little confused here. So Dustin was trying to clarify what the intent was.
So what, can someone please help on that then? Because I heard IBC, but we're amending it also to IFC, which is not part of the 2024 code yet? Or it is? Adoption. Go ahead, anyone, if you have an answer to that.
No, I don't have an answer to it, but I mean, if it's defined in one of the two, that's at least enough.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful to be in both places, but if it is only defined in the building code, it's at least there and can be used.
What did the fire code, the fire tag propose?
They propose to include this proposal in the adoption of this. So this proposal only speaks to the IBC, and that's why I raised the question.
It's just a correlation. Custodial care is already in the fire code also, and it's just assume that the correlation would continue with the limited verbal or physical assistance definition, that it would be correlated into the fire code also. It's a simple proposal, just definitions.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, Chris, and then Al, please.
Well, thanks. Yeah, unlike Dave, I'm not as against repeating myself. So I just really want us all to understand the people that are in this room talking about these code changes, and it has been confusing for us all, are the most in tune with the code people in the state. So we are all paying attention. We are all trying. We are all spending extra time. And it's still difficult for us to understand, at least relatively so. Even though it's characterized as a simple proposal, it's existed in the code forever. It's not what we've done in the state. Our AHJs and our designers that do not specialize in this type of use, this will be new for them. It will also be coming off cycle. So everything we can do to make it clearer and more consistently applied makes 100% sense. And we are talking about definitions here. And these definitions help us apply the code appropriately. And the definitions come from our own Department of Health. So I really don't understand the being against their inclusion with this adoption.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Let's go Al and then Roger, please.
Thank you. As the original, I'm representing the Department of Health here today, and as the original proponent of this rule project, I just want to make it clear that the Department of Health has absolutely no concerns about the addition of these definitions, especially. Not especially. I was just going to joke, and you all know John's my boss, right? But anyhow, we have no concerns about this. If this is helpful for people to better understand it, and there's a correlation piece with the fire code, I think it makes sense. We're all for it. Thank you.
Roger, please.
Well, the last two people answered my question, which is, it seems to be that is the definition does look, it looks to me like it would be something under the purview of the Department of Health, not in a building code definition. But if the Department of Health supports it, then I'm, certainly any clarification that we can do in code language is important and good. Rather than leaving a question mark and it gets interpreted various ways by different people. And if it is something that is going to be in the next code cycle, I would support it, particularly if the Department of Health doesn't have any concerns. So.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Ron.
I just want to, I guess, clarify that I don't actually oppose, despite my statements earlier, I don't oppose adding this particular provision. What I'm more hesitant about is the protocols and the administrative process and whether or not more things will now be added. I mean, is this it? Or are we gonna, because of this newness of the R4, what is left that under the base code language would be added? And so that part, my hesitancy here wasn't the actual addition of the language, which I was fine with, and I mentioned that even when it came forth at the IFC. My hesitancy is in the administrative process and the fact that extra items are being added to the R4 adoption, which are not R4 related. They're base code interpretations that need to be addressed separately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Micah?
Ron, you make a good point there, and I think that's just part of the process. You know, this is, I mean, the state is about developing code and code language. It's not always about just taking the base model language and adopting it as is. When we do identify areas of interpretation that would be inconsistent or cause inconsistencies, and those are the things we would like to discuss and try to, you know, figure out a process forward. That's kind of what this definition does. Now, do I agree with the definition 100%? No, I think it's kind of wordy. It probably could be better. But again, that's just part of the code development process. It's not that it's wrong or doesn't need to be there, but I think that's what we're here for. And I've heard that from several other folks as well. Is like, we're not here just to adopt in the R4 language in the base model. We're here to, how do we incorporate R4 back into our code based on all the things we've done for the I occupancies over the years? And then how do we make that to where it's consistently enforced through the code language that we have or put in? So it could be an ongoing process. I know we're going to bring up some topics on some other sections as well. So it may change from base code model, but it's not under the intent of making it worse. It's under the intent of making it better and applying consistent interpretation throughout the state, so we're not all over the map. So thanks for your points, but I agree that we need a definition there to some extent for some clarification for code officials.
Okay, thank you, Micah. Michael.
Sorry, unmute. I agree with both Chris and Micah, and so I won't repeat their points. But I think, you know, to Ron's point, it actually is directly related to R4. So I think it does. You know, if we were to not include this language, that would harm the R4. If it spills over into the I1 or I2, then there's no harm there, especially being that that's where the language came from in the first place. So I think including this is, you know, not just good, I think it's ideal. So.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, this has been helpful for me personally. I appreciate the input. I think I understand better and remind everyone we will get a chance in a year or two to, as we roll into 2024, to take a second look at this. Help me understand it. So we're talking, are we looking for a specific motion on this and then we have additional items today to consider? Or is this the bulk of what we're trying to work on today?
On staff side, we weren't planning for additional items, but there are, if there are additional items, then.
Micah, what are you referring to? Are you referring to our meeting today to bring in something, and then yes, I was going to circle back to you.
Yeah, there are several folks I think that here want to discuss additional items. Again, there was no quorum at the BFP, and I don't think we got into some of the other items. We just kind of sent it back over here. We did mention some of them at the BFP, but again, some of us missed one of the meetings and didn't have a chance to discuss some of those topics thoroughly. We could have done that at the BFP and spent more time there, but I think we just said, hey, it's coming back to the tag. We'll spend it here.
Okay, Ardell, why don't you go first, and then I'll circle back to my question.
I do have an additional item that I'd like to bring back. I have raised it a couple times around whether these R4s should be considered a dwelling unit and how that impacts rated construction and also openness to corridors if it is not considered a dwelling unit. And so while that's something that I have flagged, it was kind of put aside as something that's more of an interpretation, but I do think that that impacts consistency of enforcement. And it would be, as a jurisdiction, helpful for me to have an understanding from the tags and from the council when this goes through, what is the interpretation from SBCC on whether an R4 is a dwelling unit or not, or does it depend? That is an additional item that if the SBCC were to land on it's not a dwelling unit, are there other provisions that should be or could be explored now to allow some flexibility for those R4s that look like a dwelling unit, but SBCC lands on it's not? And so that's why I wanted to bring this question back, this interpretation back, again, with the goal of getting some consistency. The question you asked, Todd, of are there additional items or should we deal with this first? That is, I think the tags call today is you could vote on this definition as an independent item and then bring back more issues. So that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, thank you, Adele. That's what I was looking for. And I do remember in the tag when we discussed your concern and how to frame that for the full council on R4 as a dwelling unit. Can you help me or someone help? Was that also discussed and raised at the IFC that I was not part of the last week?
I flagged it as an issue in the past couple meetings as well. So both to the IFC and to the BFP, but it hasn't been clear, like, when does that get discussed? So that's, I think at the BFP meeting, I asked if this was appropriate to bring back here today, because if there is a determination here today, and if there's code proposals as a result of that interpretation, then this would be the time to discuss those potential further changes to the R4s.
Okay, thank you for that.
Is it section 420.2, I think it was?
No, it's an interpretation. Is an R4 a dwelling unit? Because it impacts, it's a code section we haven't talked about, and it's about corridor construction. So while it is 420, so 420 requires separation of sleeping units. But if it's a dwelling unit, then it doesn't have to have separation of sleeping units. Once you get sleeping units, you get corridor construction. Once you get corridor construction, you get rated fire partition. So then you need dampers. So there's a whole slew of code requirements that then trickle out of the distinction between a dwelling unit or not a dwelling unit.
Dustin, can you show 420 just in case?
Yes, I think
as
we do this, then let's first of all, Ken, I'll come right to you. We're talking about two separate things now, and Ardell, then this is something I hope you'll raise at the full council meeting also, right? And then is there any action that a recommendation from the IBC and or IFC tags that would then raise that concern for council consideration and action? Ken, do you want to speak to that, or you want to speak to the first item, which is?
I would like to make a motion that the fire code and building code tag approved G5.-21 definition changes and correlated into the fire code and building code.
Okay, go ahead. So Ken, I agree, make that motion. Is there a second for that?
This is Al, I'd second that.
Okay, and just Ardell, we'll come back to the other issue. Is there any other discussion or that we feel needed on that particular item for the recommendation? Essentially, we're talking about a concurrence of the two tags, I think, right, on the addition by the fire code tag. Okay, if there's no other discussion on that, I think do we need to take roll on this? Is anyone, or could we just have to do a verbal vote between the two? Let's try a verbal. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll take that as let's call it concurrence. Thank you for everyone for bringing those two together, so we have a clean recommendation to the council on Friday. Okay, now circling back to other items related to this, we are in a TAG meeting. I think it is appropriate that we at least discuss. We've taken action. We made the recommendation now, but I think it's helpful if we want to. We know that this concern is going to be raised, particularly by, let's say, Ardell on Friday. Then let's just, if there's any guidance or recommendation from the TAG that we can give to the council, let's discuss that. Go ahead, Ron.
Well, this again is an issue that is, as Ardell pointed out, is related to both the R4 and the I1. And in fact, it has significant implications as indicated, particularly related to sleeping units, individually designated, or whether it's a dwelling unit. And the definition of a dwelling unit is that you have a kitchen and a bathroom together with sleeping areas. And then the sleeping unit misses one or the other, either the bathrooms or the kitchen. But the code, the R4 code relates to up to 16, which is clearly explained in the commentary. And there was a lot of, as pointed out in our recent meetings, there was a lot of implication there with the Fair Housing Act. And this particular topic is not one that I believe would be very simply agreed to, simply because there's lots of permutations, as Ardell pointed out. And there's very many different types of custodial care environments that would be applied here that have completely different methodologies and condition 1, condition 2. And then now you have an overlay of a dwelling unit decision, and I would submit it, you have to be very careful that the dwelling unit decision isn't made simply because of the type of custodial care being made, because that would reflect a discrimination based upon a disability. All of this is all going to come forth in the discussion. And so I don't believe it should be something that should be passed up lightly, and that it should, in fact, I believe the recommendation should be that it be formally addressed as a separate topic that can be discussed and reviewed for its own merits and decision-making. And in fact, we don't even have a proposal as to what would be the fix or the interpretation. And so I guess my point would be that it should be addressed, but it needs to be addressed as a separate issue, separate from the R4. And it should be brought up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. That's what I wasn't looking to reopen the whole issue here, but to establish the context, and I think that was helpful. And then Micah, you can guide us on what the recommendation currently is, and so we can clarify to the council on Friday. Go ahead, what you wanted to speak about. That's what I'm looking for. I didn't mean to open the issue back up. I want to make sure that all of us understand what the recommendation that has been proposed by both tags, and then when it comes up on Friday, how to guide the council.
Todd, I'm honestly not sure I'm going to have an answer for you, but I don't think there's been a recommendation by either tag on how to treat these. I think what we need to have is probably I'll speak and say, hey, Department of Health sees them this way, and then address code language to that. Again, I don't want you to sound like I'm kind of going against you here, Ron, but that's what this process is for. We're in special meetings to identify the problems and address the code at this point. And if this is a problem, we definitely need to know about it. I'm not sure if there's a lot of folks that, and maybe I'm off base on this, would consider an I occupancy a dwelling unit, or maybe they would, but we need to address this now in this instance, because if we don't do it now, what are the code officials going to enforce over the next, I mean, if we have to go through a whole special another process, it takes 6 months, a year, what are we going to identify these as over the next 6 months to a year until that is addressed? So I'm going to stop talking. Al, if you've got something that you can include and says Department of Health sees them this way, and then we could probably put in code language that addresses that clearly.
Thank you. Go ahead, Al, please. I think you're still
Muted, Al.
muted.
Sorry about that. Is it possible for us to look at the original proposal that we agreed to send forward to the BFP? Because there's additional language in 420.2 that's not reflected in the base language here.
Yes, Dustin, I found it on page 3. I just can't share it from here.
See
it's
the
right there with the blue one is the state amendment.
yes.
Last sentence.
So we've tried to address this with this additional language right here. Buildings containing multiple sleeping units with common use or central kitchens shall not be classified as a single dwelling. So this was our attempt to clarify exactly the difference between a sleeping and a dwelling unit. And this was agreed to previously. So I don't know if we intend to rehash this, but to me, this clarifies it right here. Because one of the things that's important to recognize, and it might be maybe a side issue, but none of the exceptions moving forward were, well, they don't carry over with the model code for 2021, nor are they there for 2024. So this was our original intent to clarify the difference between a dwelling and a sleeping unit, because there are no exceptions for effectively for separations for an R4 or an I1 or an R1, R2 or R3 or R4. There are no longer any exceptions available. That's why we purposely put in the blue language to address just that concern.
Okay, Ron, and then John, please.
The reason this particular sentence was discussed actually, and the reason that it was, I believe, left in place was because it doesn't address the definitions. We talked about that this was a Chapter 2 issue, and it was something that there was questions as to why this was located in 420.2 and not Chapter 2. And in effect, if you have a dwelling unit, then this sentence doesn't apply. And so it really doesn't clarify. And to be honest, that's why as the discussion went, I didn't have any issue with leaving the sentence in, because the definition is clear in Chapter 2. It says that when you have the various, basically it describes the kitchen and bathroom component with sleeping areas. That all to me is the overriding definition. And if there is a conflict here, there's a conflict, but this is, again, this is going to take a lot of, I mean, we just mentioned 6 months to a year. Are we going to postpone everything for 6 months to a year just to resolve this one issue? And again, that's why I do believe it's very important for us as a state to get this correct, but not at the instance of stopping everything else. And that it's not an interpretational issue that we've run into in any of the jurisdictions so far for the more than 24 facilities that we've actually been involved with.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. John, please.
Yeah, sorry, I was late to the meeting, so I just joined in and missed a lot of the conversation. So I'll try not to repeat anything that's already been talked about. Just looking at the one sentence there, I'm not sure that helps a whole lot. I know it helps in my previous experience with some certain configurations of how people were designing, shall we say, micro housing was kind of the word at the time. But you know, this just says the difficulty I see with this is that this can be broadly interpreted. So suppose I have what would ordinarily be a single family house, and it has 2 suites. It has a 2 master suites, or whatever they call them these days, right? You got a bedroom and a bathroom en suite, right? Is that a sleeping unit? I don't think so. Not if it is, you know, normal design residence. But there are cases where you take that and you have more than the 2 or more than the 3 or whatever, and that's the whole building. Yeah, they'll start looking like sleeping units. But the problem is, it just so much depends on what the configuration is. And I think trying to pin this down is going to be really difficult.
Thank you, John. Chris?
I mean, commentary is commentary, right? So it always needs to come with some skepticism. But when you look at the commentary regarding dwelling units and sleeping units, I think that there are breadcrumbs there that help clarify the intent of the code. So sleeping unit apparently was added some time ago to kind of catch all for a bunch of other definitions that had previously been in the code. So when I use the commentary in conjunction with what we have in chapter four, I don't think the intent of the code is to apply dwelling unit to any R4 use. I think those are intended to be sleeping units. We could help by potentially clarifying, and if there's consensus on that, we could clarify that by saying, in the definition of R4, that R4 is, I don't know, come up with good language, but that says that it's what it is a bunch of sleeping units, right? Instead of making sure we don't use the word dwelling unit and we use the word sleeping unit in the definition.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so where we are, my understanding is we have this as proposed, or this addition, this amendment by the proponent. We've reviewed it already. Now, I guess, is there any, is there a motion for any other proposed amendment that we'd want to take forward? Or do we need to just flag this and be ready for a discussion as the full council? Go ahead, Ardell.
I just want to kind of outline some pros and cons. We can leave the language as is, and that's okay, and not have a decision on this interpretation. Local jurisdictions will have authority, DOH will have authority. As Micah noted, like when this comes across as an I1C2, I start with treating it as sleeping units. Now that it's an R4, does that change it? That's, I think, the question, and what I think Ron has said is that it's a bigger question that can be addressed in this one. So again, I keep flagging this because if you wanted to call them sleeping units and offer some flexibility, now is the time. But you'd also get that opportunity to provide that flexibility at the next code cycle. So yeah, you can leave it with the language that we have and have DOH have an interpretation, but then allow each jurisdiction will have to figure it out on their own, and they'll each make a decision of whether it's a dwelling unit or it's sleeping units, and they'll have requirements based on that. But you'll still have to comply with DOH because they also have authority. So it's not something that has to be resolved. And I can live with the language we've got and move forward and enforce it how we see it. And then DOH is going to enforce it how they see it. And it's up to the designers to meet both as authorities, both authorities have jurisdiction. And that's okay. But I agree that the sentence, Al, I think it does provide some clarity, but it doesn't, as John and Ron have pointed out, if I'm treating it as a dwelling unit, then that sentence doesn't apply. So I was just trying to, I keep raising this because I'm trying not to get a pit and match between jurisdictions and DOH that the designers are going to flag to us and try and pit us against each other in that regard. And again, so it's consistency of enforcement that I'm struggling with when we don't have it clear on the intent. So that's all I wanted to offer. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ardell. I learn something every time we talk about this. So appreciate it. Okay, let's go to Roger, please.
Oh, I am not somebody who has a deep understanding of sleeping units and dwelling units, but I do guess I understand that what we are proposing may complicate, it is a bigger question. And potentially being addressed in the 2024 code. I don't know that, but in future code cycles, if there's ambiguity in the code, can that be addressed in future code cycles? We've been asked to come up with a proposal that addresses the R4. And this is an amendment, I believe, to our code. So would it be possible for us, and if this doesn't work, fine, but can the blue sentence say specifically for R4 occupancies, buildings containing multiple? Can we make that sentence only apply to R4? So the bigger question is not, is still out there to be answered. But what we've been tasked to do is to get the R4 through, and so do some sort of code language that just addresses R4 and kick the can down the road on the larger question. So I don't know who could answer that best. I see Micah's hands up next. He normally has a good an opinion on something. So that's my question.
So Micah, Alan, John, if anyone has the direct answer to that, go ahead.
I guess mine will kind of address some of that. So Roger, thanks for putting me on the spot. And yes, I do have an opinion like all the time. So I appreciate everybody's patience. I'm not a fan of kicking down the road necessarily unless it's for something that's beneficial or can't be addressed. I do have some concerns on this. What Ardell mentioned about getting between, the jurisdictions and Department of Health. I'm not sure how to clarify it either. I think if Department of Health says these should be treated as sleeping units, then we should just say that in the code, simplify it, put it in there, said R4s shall be designed as sleeping units. I think that leads back to some of the other changes that would question this, where we still point to assisted living facilities under the I condition as licensed by Washington State under the WAC, but we don't do that in R4s. So then who has jurisdictions? Are the R4s licensed by the Washington Department of Health or not? And would they have authority to say something other than what the code official would? So this does kind of lend back to other sections that we're modifying. So we do have some additional concerns, and it's not clear. And I'm not sure that just adopting base language or not being consistent throughout will solve the issue either. So again, if Department of Health says we have viewed these in the past historically for the last 25, 30 years since they've been doing licensed care facilities and they've been in the code as or should be treated as sleeping units, then maybe it's not that difficult that simple or we identify simple language to either put in this section or another section of the code that this applies to. So it is clear to the designer and the enforcement agency. Thanks.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you. Well, Micah, I wanted to address one of your thoughts there, and that is, while assisted living is in the R4 description, we have a state amendment under the I1 occupancy classification that says if you're going to be a licensed assisted living facility in the state of Washington under 388-78A, you have to be an I1C2. So that trumps anything that the R4 talks about. So I think we're safe there. The other thing I want to suggest is I'm willing to narrow this language down to make it very specific. So if there was perhaps a group home or some other entity that might be included in the R4 classification, that the Department of Health is fine with if that wants to be considered a dwelling home. But what we're concerned about at the Department of Health, and we do have a long-standing interpretation and application, that when it comes to licensed residential treatment facilities that are providing inpatient mental health or substance use disorder treatment services on a transient, they're not there to live for long term. We believe these are sleeping units, and as such, they're required to have the separations that would be akin to the sleeping unit. So if we want to say, I'd be open to, if you all want to say when it comes to licensed residential treatment facilities under a specific amendment that addresses the DOH licensed residential treatment facilities that clarifies that if you use the R4 and you're applying to be licensed residential treatment facility, you're not going to be a dwelling unit ever. You're going to have sleeping units. I would be fine if we wanted to narrow it down just to licensed residential treatment facilities. And one other thing, Micah, to answer your question, licensed assisted living facilities in the state of Washington are licensed by DSHS, Department of Social and Health Services. So I'm open to a friend, if people want to narrow this down so it's very specific to meet our concerns, and how we've historically looked at this, and to clarify it for everyone for consistency, I'm fine with calling it out as just being a specific amendment to RTFs licensed in the state of Washington. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Al. John.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just I jumped in to address Roger's question. I would not personally, if I were in a position to have to enforce this, would not be in favor of limiting this to that last sentence there in 420.2 to R4s. Again, there were some situations we were dealing with in Seattle several years ago where this would have helped quite a bit. They were not R4s. So I would prefer to leave this not specific to R4s.
Okay, thank you, John. Ron, please.
Well, just to, I guess, provide, as with any topic or context, there's varying applications that could be applied here. And I did send this example to Ardell earlier. I mean, if you have a 4-bedroom house in a rural community that you would like to have used for custodial care, if you mandate that every bedroom be turned into a sleeping unit, you basically have to tear half the house down and redo it. Simply because you're a dwelling unit, it's a house, it has a permanent kitchen and bathrooms, it has 4 bedrooms, you intend to have 8 occupants, you meet all the provisions of the R4, yet that particular, if you mandate that that's required to be sleeping units, you pretty much have disallowed that particular occupancy to occur. And so there's a lot of implication here that's broader over the entire state when this is the exact type of facility that's desperately needed. And so to add a sentence or a provision that restricts or pushes the R4 to have to be a certain way, for instance, to have to use sleeping units, needs to be carefully reviewed more than just a conversation. And there needs to be a proposal as to how that would be reviewed. And at this point, as we've been going back and forth, there really actually isn't a proposal as to what would be the fix other than these comments about adding this to the R4 or not. And I think it's important for the process for us to have an actual written proposal for what would be the solution to the interpretation before it becomes something that becomes a roadblock to I guess, looking future on the remainder of the code question that we're here to ask.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ron. And yes, we have not heard a proposal for amendment to this yet, but I think, ultimately the council is taking action. So if there is, we can make a recommendation, or if one were to be proposed. Micah, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, we've already got a proposal that does that. Let me just speak to Ron's question, then I had kind of another one for Al. What we are here to do is explore if R4s can be put back in the code effectively. We already have an answer to that question with these classified as an I. Ardell even spoke to that. When these come in, we automatically treat them as sleeping units. There's no question if it's a dwelling unit. Now that we're introducing R4s, now we're going to say, oh, well, now we've got an issue that we have to address. How are we going to do that consistently? At least that's what I'm hearing. So if you're looking for a proposal, that is, hey, the code can stay as is. It already exists. There's an understanding of how to enforce it. Now, it may be more beneficial to look for some alternatives for the designers to find something that's either cheaper to do or to provide these in a more rapid method to get them online. But that in itself is should not be the concern with the council here. It should be addressing the code. And again, there's nothing that says we have to adopt this. We were tasked to explore this. We can leave the code alone if it addresses these concerns and issues. So if you want a proposal, it's already there. The language exists. We don't have to provide a new one. We don't have to vote to approve this or move it forward. So if there are concerns with consistency in language, it exists. We can leave the code as is and not have as many concerns. So please don't think that we were said, hey, you have to do this R4 thing. No, we don't have to. If we have too many issues and the code works consistently now, we can leave it alone. Then to address, to kind of come back to what Al was talking about on the business practices. If they change their business practices to where they go to something more restrictive, is there a trigger from the Department of Health or whoever licensed these that sends it back to the jurisdiction to, get those more restrictive requirements? In other words, if they're doing something that meets the R4, but then they change that now, hey, it's got to meet the I condition and have more robust code, application. How does the jurisdiction know that? Obviously, some of the folks on here are seeing this with DCYF and the whole family home daycare item where they're issuing waivers, but there's not necessarily a trigger that tells the jurisdiction that, hey, you have to do more robust code requirements on this process here or this application or the licensed facility. So Al, is there a process that does that? So we know when the business practice changes? Because we could see a lot of these come in under one thing, and then a few months later they change to another, and we may not come in and get those more robust code requirements. Thanks.
I can answer, but I don't want to go out of turn.
Oh, go ahead, Al, if you directly answer, and then I'll go back to Mark.
Yeah, I'd like to answer. Yes, Micah, we, as the licensing agency for RTFs, we regularly are out doing annual surveys, inspections, and we are looking to verify whether or not their operations, their use has changed. And if even it's something as simple as, let's say we move forward with the R4 and we originally, not only Department of Health, but the local AHJ approves them as an R4 condition 1, but we discovered that through the course of their practice or they've evolved their admission policies, they're all of a sudden a condition 2. That would raise flags. We would bring that up to the AHJ, and we would also likely condition their license. If they wanted to maintain their license, we would condition it that they meet the current requirements for the condition 2, so that we do feel like we would have recourse in that regard. The other thing I wanted to respond to is, I understand the desire to use the IRC for use for mental health and substance use disorder licensed treatment facilities, but we're not talking about using the IRC. We're talking about using the R4. You couldn't even take an IRC built structure and say, well, we're going to turn this into a licensed healthcare facility, because it would have to be an R4 that would immediately require a change of occupancy. And as such, you're going to have to meet the R4 commercial provisions. There's not a requirement. Some existent examples. The IRC currently in the state's not required to provide sprinkler systems. You would as an R4. And if you're a condition 2, you would have to have some other components as well. So if I understand the desire to use the IRC for other provisions, but this isn't the right avenue for it. We're talking about the commercial code. So that's what I have to offer there.
Okay, thank you, Al. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I think it's healthy to review that, my comments from a couple meetings ago, and I really think it's healthy not to have in a code any kind of dependency on a state regulatory agency. So I think when we reference anything licensed by the Department of Health, I think we were trying to move to get those references out of the code body. And in addition to that, I think some of what we're talking about belongs in the IEBC when you're starting to talk about converting houses into R4s. And so, we've got to make sure that correlates with the changes we're making here in I codes. And I think since we do have two layers of regulation on any of these facilities, that the life safety issues will be captured by either one of the authorities having jurisdiction. And I think that we agreed to this sentence last time, and I think we should move it forward like it's written. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Go ahead, Ardell.
So thank you for the discussion. It sounds like we have some differing opinions on whether it's a dwelling unit or sleeping unit, specifically for what DOH has as an overview of or has authority over. They're seeing them as sleeping units and not a dwelling unit. And I think that's fine. But the list of R4 has many things listed that are not under DOH. And then the determination will be up to the local authority. So Stoyan, do you mind scrolling down to the R4 list at the top there?
Dustin is in charge.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, Dustin, thank you. Al, just so I'm clear, of the list here, I know it just says including but not limited to, what does DOH have authority over?
Okay, we only have authority under for licensed residential treatment facilities, licensed under WAC 246-337. So if I were to look at this list, I would say that that probably would include alcohol and drug centers. And I'm not sure, I don't know if there's a definition of social rehabilitation facilities, but that would be my second one. I don't think that's a maybe for me, Ardell.
Okay.
The rest, I think, don't apply to us at all from our interest standpoint.
Okay, thank you for that. So, and Micah, thanks for the reminder that there's things here that aren't covered by DOH. So, so bringing this back in, again, I think it's okay to bring it back in and use the language, but you are going to have inconsistent enforcement, and maybe that's okay. That each jurisdiction will then, for the things that aren't under DOH, will be making their own determination of whether it's a dwelling unit or not. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And so when we bring something back in and we don't understand the full cost, I think that that is something that the SBCC should be aware of, at least, that there will be potentially inconsistent enforcement of this across the state, where some are treating them as sleeping units and some will see them as dwelling units. And again, that's a much bigger, potentially bigger discussion that needs to be evaluated. But again, you will potentially get inconsistent enforcement across the state.
Okay. Okay, Al, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go back to the original rule, the request for rulemaking, which was made by us, and we specifically asked for the adoption of R4 for the use of licensed residential treatment facilities. I absolutely appreciate what Ardell's saying, is that we do want to strive for consistency, and it makes it, we don't want to make it the wild, wild west with all the different AHJs and, you know, none of the builders or the providers or whatever, they can't, it's going to be one thing in one jurisdiction, another thing in a different jurisdiction. So, I mean, one way to address this, because maybe this is a bigger picture, we actually asked for the R4 specifically for licensed residential treatment facilities, an effort to bring down the cost of construction for those facilities that met the criteria for R4. I would be okay if it's important to everybody, we could make the original the proposal speak only to licensed residential treatment facilities, and it would only adopt the R4 for such.
Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Well, the difficulty, Al, with that is that, as you know, residential treatment center licenses have a very broad spectrum of services, and that you can go from the common example is inpatient weight loss management to involuntary psychiatric treatment facilities. those all operate under an R4 license.
No,
So I mean, that's, well, that's what I mean, the facility in Olympia for the parenting pregnant women, that's a residential treatment facility. And so we had a lot of issue with that facility under this same issue. And so, and we're doing, as we said, involuntary psychiatric facilities under a residential treatment facility. And so there is such a broad spectrum under the RTF code that it doesn't relate to the R4. And I think in terms of classifying condition 1 or 2. And so what's occurred over the last number of years is that we've been I1 condition 2, which is the worst case scenario, which means that everything's been built to the strictest conformance of code. That's why we're here, is that the R4 is designed and is in the commentary explained. It's for smaller facilities where you don't need as much of a robust construction and overall life safety system when you have 16 or less occupants. And so that's why I would say that tying this to the residential treatment facility licensure I would not be a good thing, simply because until the residential treatment facility licensure had different components in it regarding how to view different types of operations.
Okay. Micah, please.
Trying to process that a little bit, Ron and Al. I think I know where both of you are trying to get to, but from Al, were you indicating that the list under 310.5 would be mostly eliminated and just say the residential treatment facilities licensed by you, and that would be all that would be included in that list, and then that determination would be up to you, or the jurisdiction would have to get that that occupancy classification from you, and if it wasn't under your criteria, then it would be an I condition. Is that what you were indicating, Al?
no, Ron's right. We're actually trying to get out of a one size fits all for residential treatment facilities. We want to really rely on the building code and use. So I want to make something very clear. The Department of Health never would license an involuntary setting as an R4 ever. Even the mere
sorry, go ahead.
Even the mere presence of a seclusion room, perhaps, would disqualify a facility from using an R4 occupancy classification, even if they had 16 residents or 6 to 16 residents, as I think. More than 5. Okay, yeah, 6 to 16. So we're going to use, the Department of Health is intending to use the building code and use. So if you're telling us that your use is like a jail, we're going to classify you as an I3. And we have those, Micah. We actually have those. Okay. If you're telling us that you're going to provide services for pediatric transitional care services, that's basically a pediatric nursing home, we're going to classify you as an I2. If you're doing voluntary services where people can come and go as they please, and there's 6 to 16 persons, and you meet the criteria for the commercial R4, then we'll allow you to use that. I'm just trying to throw out some suggestions. I recognize that these are really good conversations. Obviously, we haven't had, everyone's right, we haven't had the R4 for probably better than 20 years. We've never adopted it. It's never been a part of, it's never been adopted in the state of Washington, so that I'm aware of. So what we're trying to do, really our ask was to try and find, we're trying to get rid of the amendment that says you're an I1 condition 2 generically if you're a licensed residential treatment facility. That's part of this proposal. The other thing we're trying to say is we want the use to be the determining factor for what the classification is going to be. Okay, would make no sense for us to say, oh, you're involuntarily receiving services as one example because you've been deemed not competent to stand trial. So you're, and the reason that you're receiving those services is so that you can be, determined competent to stand trial. That's not ever going to be an R4. That's like a jail. That's going to be an I3. So I understand the conversation. I understand that there's differences of interpretations versus the dwelling and sleeping. I do respect that. I know that there are even differing opinions when you ask ICC for an opinion on that. And that is something that we probably need to look at. I would just like to use, I'm telling you, we're going to consider licensed residential treatment facilities that through the Department of Health, we're going to consider them sleeping units, and we're going to require, using the R4 occupancy classification, we're going to require the separations that are required for that versus a dwelling unit.
Okay. Thanks, Al. That's helpful. I think we're all getting closer, and it's not major. And if there are inconsistent applications or interpretations, then that should be okay, as long as the designers are aware of that. And hopefully we do see those designers come back with some code language that may be better, or at least some proposals that could help clarify that in the future. So thanks for the answers, and thanks for the input.
Agreed. Thank you. Michael.
I think it's also important to point out that in 310.5, it is limited to persons who reside on a 24-hour basis, supervised, and receive custodial care. So there's nothing in there where it's just a living situation. It's all about receiving custodial care, which really does point, almost all of them to UH anyway. So it's not just, like take group homes for an example. It's not just a regular group home. A regular group home would be classified under the R2 or R3 depending on size. The only way it lands in R4 is if they're receiving custodial care.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
I just also want to remind, or at least reinforce, the fact that Washington State is the only state in the country that did not and has not adopted the R4, 1 out of 50. And the R4 has, as I've mentioned a few times, there's a lot of implications with the Fair Housing Act in the interpretation. So any of this discussion regarding limiting and designating based upon the individuals receiving care in an R4 facility, there's very strong national reasons based upon the Fair Housing Act that the R4 is in place. And so I think that's an overlay or a filter that needs to be reviewed in terms of the discussion as well.
Okay. Oh, okay, Ardell.
Thanks. I appreciate the discussion here. I do want to just reiterate, I am okay with adopting the language as proposed, including the clarification that Al added in 420.2. And while the OH doesn't have jurisdiction over all of that list, again, I think it's okay for each local AHJ to make that determination. It will be inconsistent potentially, but that's okay. And I want to just say I didn't raise this issue to stall this proposal. I'm raising this issue to get better clarity. And I think I'm hearing that here, that it will just be up to the local AHJs. So thank you.
And I thank you, Ardell. I didn't know I was going to learn so much today, so this has been helpful. Roger, please.
Well, I just want to, I have this feeling like if we are passing implementing these things, and there is ambiguity and different interpretations from different municipality, I feel like we are not doing our jobs. And maybe I'm incorrect, but if there's any group that could help clarify it, is it not this group? How else are we going to resolve the question? And if that answer is passing the R4 as it stands right now with the blue sentence in there, and coming back and looking at it further in the next code cycle or something, that's fine with me, but I still feel like it's our job if they're and you know, being a practitioner, I hate it when different jurisdictions interpret things differently. So I'm fine going forward as it is, but I do feel like we are, I don't know, skipping out a little bit on our duties because we're the group that can solve it. So again, I'm fine doing it. I think it needs to be resolved. If that's resolved in the next code cycle so that there is more clarity, that's fine with me. But hopefully there will be a proposal to clarify that one way or the other that we can address at the next code cycle. So.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Okay, with that, I feel like we're getting close. Are we comfortable? We have recommendations for the council meeting on Friday. And unless I think at this point, unless someone has a motion for some other amendment, go ahead, Micah.
Sorry again, I definitely apologize for not being at the building code tag the previous week because I did have some concerns on some areas that got pushed forward, and I know others have raised them as well. If we go to the motor vehicle related facility section 1107 and the language, we're automatically putting R4 back in there. A couple of questions. The way that or a couple of points. The way that reads, you just passed it, I think. Go back. If you're looking for it on the screen, doesn't.
I think we might be in a different section. It might be in the section below this. I'll get it pulled up here.
You scrolled past it a moment ago.
There is a state amendment, so it's in the first 3 or 4 pages. It should be there.
Yeah, there you go, right there. We're automatically putting in R4. I thought this was addressed, and I'm not sure why we would exempt R4 from the requirements based on the current legislation. In addition to that, the way that's worded, it says and. If you interpreted that, some people could interpret that as saying that it has to be an R3 and an R4 for this to be exempt as a mixed use, not one or the other. But again, I'm not sure how this.
I'm sorry. This is the model code language, so it's copy paste from the model code.
I understand that, but that doesn't mean it meets the intent of our legislation, and it doesn't mean that it could be read incorrectly. And the base model code language actually has three or 4 occupancy listed there, not just 2. So it doesn't read correctly in my opinion. And again, does this meet the intent of the legislation that removed any occupancy classifications from being exempt from providing EV charging stations? I mean, they removed R3, so I'm not sure that the current amendment is correct either. So that's what I'm bringing up here. And then we had some questions on the language in 903 for the sprinklers, where it shows that certain sprinklers shall be permitted. Does that mean they're not required, or are they required? Again, we're talking about interpretation questions here, and if we're going to prove this, do we need to be clear on what we're approving and when? So if you go to 903.2.8 and 903.2.8.3 and 903.3.1.3, again, those say they shall be permitted to be installed. So are they not required? That would be a question. And Chris, you have your hand up. You might be able to answer that right out of the gate.
That's in my wheelhouse. Those 903 sections are all about which standard is permitted to be used. So the sprinklers are required, and then those following sections list when you can use, for example, a 13D or a 13R, or when you have to use a 13 in its entirety. So I'm not concerned about that particular part.
Did that answer your question, Mike, on chapter 9? Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
And then I saw the question on EV, and then John, looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to respond to Chris. Actually, I agree with Micah. It's really unclear what's the minimum requirement on these. If you go to 903.283 R4 condition 2, an automatic sprinkler system installed in accordance with section, basically a 13R system, shall be permitted. Well, does that mean I can put in a 13D? Shall be permitted is not mandatory language. It just says it's optional.
Yes.
So I don't think I don't think there's anything that says what the minimum requirement is in all of these. That would be my concern.
I think it's covered in 420, but I'll check.
The minimum requirement is back in the whichever one of, if it says you can install either, so like in 903.282 condition 1, you can use the lesser standard. That's what that's saying, the 13D standard. In 903.283 R4 condition 2, you have to use the 13R standard. And the fire sprinkler standards are stacked on each other. Anywhere you could have installed a D, you could install an R, and anywhere you could have installed an R, you could install a full 13. They are stacked that way in hierarchy.
Yeah, I understand that. That part, you can always over design. You can exceed the code, but I don't think anything here says what the minimum is.
Oh, okay. I mean, the way I've always read these is, I mean, what they're telling you what the minimum is. So in 903.282, it's referencing 13D, which is the minimum. In 903.283, it's referencing 13R, which would be the minimum in that case.
I mean, we don't have to hold it up necessarily for these issues, but I think that's certainly something that could be much better clarified.
Sure. I think fire service wise, Ken's got his hand up. I think we're used to dealing with that language all the time. I'll let Ken go though, if that's okay.
Ken.
Thanks. So it gets a little bit more clarified if you go into 903.3.1.3. It spells out R4 condition 1 for NFA 13D systems, and in 903.3.1.2, it spells out R4 condition 2, I believe. Yeah, it says R4 condition 2. Well, that's just for attics, but
from a strict code language standpoint, it's not correct language. It's bad language.
Well, if you start off with the very beginning of the 903.2.8, which I think was referenced for group R, it says every group R occupancy shall be sprinklered. And then you go down to what is permitted to put in which type of condition. And so it starts with the most restricted, which is 13, and then it works kind of like Chris was saying, negatively. So I can put in a 13D in an R4 condition 1, and I can put in a 13R in R4 condition 2. So I think it's very clear. I don't think it's confusing, and I don't think that we need to change anything in the model code to make any changes in this section.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Micah?
It's always interesting how folks that work for similar jurisdictions have differing opinions, isn't it? I tend to lean towards more what John's saying as well, but again, I do think we're looking for minimum standards. What's the minimum requirements? When you go back to the charging language in chapter 3 that says R4s can be constructed as an R3, does that mean the sprinkler systems can be as well? It's just those circular things. I know it's all interpretation questions and how do you enforce that, but not the end of the world, but it is curiosity and good points to make. And maybe these are the things we need to address in the next code cycle. I do appreciate that Ken and Chris both mentioned that, in the fire service and the time they've spent in there, but there are small jurisdictions throughout the state where the code official is the fire code official as well, and they may not have that same historical background. So that's kind of some of the things that we need to look at there is just to make sure that, hey, everybody understands this and it's clear. So again, we don't have to change it today, but I think these are some topics that do need to be looked at in the future. If we want to change them now, that'd be fine. You know, like Roger says, maybe we shouldn't be kicking the can. You know, if we need to take a few more meetings, it may be better now than 6-8 months down the road. So thanks.
Okay, so that, anything else on 903? John, go ahead.
Sorry, it wasn't a 903. I didn't know where we were on discussing this whole process. So I did have one just question maybe for, and I don't know if it got addressed before I jumped in. I'm sorry. In section 1108, sorry, it's 1111.2, facilities serving R2, R3, R4. It's in the kind of second grouping of stuff that we weren't going to amend.
Okay, let's raise that question, then we still have to circle back to Micah's EV question, I think. Go
Okay,
ahead,
I'm
John.
sorry. Yeah, I just had a question. I'm sorry, it's a section above that. It's 1108.6.4.1 on accessible units. There's actually an 1108.6.4.2 for type B units. Is that not being adopted, or was that just an omission? So right in the middle of the page there, you've got 1108.6.4.1 accessible units. That one there, yep. And then following that, there's an 1108, excuse me, in the model code anyway, 0.6.4.2 for type B units. And I just want to know, are we not adopting the type B units, or was that just an omission?
I believe that's probably an omission on our part, on error. You know, it may not have directly referenced R4 in that code text, and we didn't pull it into this document.
Okay, because it is obviously intended to apply to group R4s because it's a subsection to that, but okay, just wanted to clarify.
So I'm not clear, John, are you saying that should be added in?
Yes, I'll clarify that. Yes, that is base code language that is not shown on the screen. Again, some folks may have some questions on what is shown on the screen because it doesn't include all the code context. In other words, it's a subsection to 1104 or 1108.6.4.1.
Yeah.
And it's 1106.4.2. It does not specifically say R4, but it applies to the section above and it includes type B. So in other words, we just want to be clear that everybody understands all the context and what is being captured. So it should be included as part of the base code language that may have been stricken before, even if R4 wasn't a part of that section.
So do we actually need to take a motion to recommend that shows up in the packet on Friday?
I would say yes. I'm not a member of the tag though.
Okay, Ron, go ahead.
Well, I thought the purpose of the highlighting was to identify all the areas of the code where the R4 is mentioned, and it doesn't mean that because it's not mentioned, it's not applicable. I mean, there's provisions regarding stairs and maximum rise and run that apply to everything, and that's not mentioned here because it's not specific to the R4. So the inclusion of all those items, which was added by staff, was simply a way to identify all of the areas in the code where the R4 is specifically identified. And what the code says is that if R4 is not specifically identified under a condition, then the R4 is to be designed or is to use the R3 as the model. So if there's something in there where it doesn't specifically say R4 is required to be this, or this, and a question comes up, it reverts to R3. And that is part of the base code language.
That may be so, but I'm going to disagree with you on this instance for sure. And I haven't had a chance to go through and evaluate all these. But if you look at what's shown on the screen from Dustin currently, this is specific to R4, although that section doesn't specifically say R4 in it. The charging language of that section does. So this would not revert back to R3 issues in that instance.
Well,
but again, this is not shown on what we're sending forward. So I think John is correct. We should be showing this entire section as moving forward as part of the recommendation.
I don't disagree.
Okay, Al?
Yeah, I would agree with Mike. As a matter of fact, I'm as a member of the TAG, I'm willing to make a motion that we include 1108.6.4.2 to this proposal.
Okay.
It should be in there. It definitely applies to R4.
Okay,
So I'm ready to make that motion.
thank you, Al. Is there a second?
This
I'll
is
second.
Quinn, second it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Quinn. Okay, on that amendment, any other discussion?
Clarify that includes the exception when we say that, right?
My assumption is that everyone else's.
Yeah, that would be consistent with my motion.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Okay, and again, we'll do a verbal, there's no other discussion. We'll do a verbal between both IBC tag and IFC tag. Is that okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay. Okay, so we'll include that amendment. And by the way, I'm assuming if we have unanimous votes, that we don't need to go through roll call. If there was a split, I would call the roll. Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it, John. Okay, anything else? We need to circle back, Micah, right? To EV? Are we okay?
Yeah, sorry. If we want to scroll to that section, Dustin, I appreciate it. And again, I'm not as worried about the language. I mean, it is base code language, but it does seem that it could apply to mixed use, or it has to be a mixed use for the exception to apply. But my question specifically will be about the exception itself. Again, based on current state legislation that we modified EV infrastructure requirements for, this exception should not exist for Washington State, period.
Which one, Mike? Again, just remind us. Are you
1107.2 electric vehicle charging stations.
Yep.
State legislation removed the exception for R3, and there was no exception for R4. So there should be no exception here that they don't have to comply with this section of accessibility for those charging stations.
So you're saying the proposal would be to strike both those exceptions?
That would be my understanding. But again, if we keep the R3, again, I'm not trying to go back and change what we've already done. I'm just trying to change the R4. I don't think R4 should be included in that exception for this code change. I'm not going to go back and modify the current WAC language or something else, but I don't think the intent of the legislation is to exempt R4 from this. And I believe we do have a mistake in exempting R3s based on the legislation as well. But again, I'm not going into that, just for R4.
Go ahead, Ron.
I guess I want to ask a question here. You know, an R4 facility is for custodial care, and I'm not aware in any of the facilities that we've ever worked on where any of the individuals receiving care ever have cars or are actually parking in the parking lot. And so it seems, at least from a practicality point of view, to be odd to be requiring electric charging stations for what's essentially a custodial care where the residents don't actually drive. I mean, it's just I think if the exception was made to the R3, it would apply to the R4 as well. But it can come up later. I mean, this is it's a minor point, and I guess I don't have any opinion one way or the other whether it's included or not.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Chris?
I think just the reason why it's important, I mean, is that there are people providing that care that do drive. So that's where that would apply, or those visiting, those receiving care. So it would be just aligning with all of our other amendments that are requiring EV charging and for that charging to be accessible. So I think Micah's correct in that we should not be exempting Group R4 from compliance with accessibility for EV chargers.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Quinn?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate something that Ardell mentioned earlier, is that R4 also includes other occupancies, other groups other than the ones that are licensed with the state. So, we have to consider as a whole how this affects other groups.
Okay, thank you, Quinn. Micah.
I looking at 429 is what we've adopted. You may not get there to an R4 to even require them, Ron. The table does talk about the EV charging stations are not required for buildings that do not contain more than 2 dwelling units, and certain things like that. So there are some exceptions, but again, I don't think we should be accepting it out of this section. When they do apply, they should be accessible. And that's my point is you're not going to necessarily get them right out of the gate, but that section 429, which was based on legislation, does apply to all our occupancies, and I don't think we should be providing an exception. I think the exception for R3 is incorrect as well, but again, we're not addressing the R3 today. We're just addressing the R4. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
Yeah, I don't think we should be, I agree with Micah that it shouldn't apply to R4. I'm looking at the two exceptions. Are they not identical? I'm a little
confused by that also, but
I'm reading through them and comparing words and they look identical. So I don't understand why there are two exceptions there. So I would, the R3, if we're leaving that open, having one exception, get rid of R2 and R4 is what I would suggest. And then get rid of the second exception in its entirety.
Yeah. I agree. Ron, do you have a comment?
No, I don't have any objection to, I mean, I agree that there are staff and that there is a need for these particular charging stations in the future, as much as it's a filter that's coming across on a different state policy, which is fine. And I think that we should be consistent with the state policy, and I don't have any objection to removing the exception.
Okay, thank you for that. Roger, did you want to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that the second exception gets struck in its entirety on the page that I'm looking at here. And I believe that the top exception is now correct because we are taking R2 and R4 out. We're leaving the exception for R3. So I would make a proposal to make those modifications. I don't know if Dustin, you're running the show there, but I would cross out all of that exception. And then I believe the section of the exception piece above reads as I would propose, which gets rid of the R4 out of the exception. That's my poorly worded.
No, but that's clear, Roger. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. It looks like Micah has some discussion.
Okay, I just wanted to get the second out there since Mike is not on the take. Thank you. Okay, so it's been moving a second, and now Micah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to try to help Roger. Actually, we don't have to take any action. The current language he's proposing is what is in the upcoming WAC language for 2021, and so I don't think that needed to be included in his motion. Sorry, I was just trying to help you out, Roger. But the motion second has been made, and we'll get there. Thanks.
Mike, I'm not clear. You're saying just striking what's in purple here is it sufficient?
If I had a way to show you the WAC language, the language for the charging language of 1107.2 is correct, and then the first exception is actually what we do currently for 2021. We strike R2 and R4, and the only thing left is R3. Right, so that is the current WAC. So there's technically, as long as you don't move the R4 inclusion forward, then there will be no additional action necessary.
Okay. Okay. Let's if everyone's clear on that, we'll still take the verbal vote to
I will, Micah, correct me if I'm wrong, then my motion is to just get rid of the second exception, which is really just a cleanup.
That's how I understand it. Is everyone else, is that how the second?
Yeah, yep, I'll agree with that.
Okay, so if everyone's clear on that, let's do a voice vote for that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Okay. Thank you for raising that point. Okay, are we there? And by there, I mean, we're ready to forward this recommendation to what will now be the full council on Friday for potential action, hearing and an action. Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I like I said, I learned a lot today. That was healthy. And I think that also assists us in being able to bring forward context to the council. With that, we'll close that item. I don't know, on the agenda, do we have an opportunity to?
Point of order.
Yes, please.
Todd, did you need a motion from the two groups to carry this forward?
You know, Al, I was going off of that. Both tags had already made that recommendation. I guess you're saying since we made an amendment, we should do that?
I think we made several.
Okay, I agree with you. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's and maybe just for the sake of it, because we have two tags, well, first of all, I guess we need a motion then, Al.
I'm willing to make that motion. Would move that we move this forward for consideration to the BFP as we've worked through this today, as shown on the screen, with the addition of the definitions and everything else that we've talked about.
Okay, I need a point of order. Is it to the BFP, Stoyan and Dustin, or is it straight to the council, or does that not matter?
I believe it's to the BFP this Friday.
Okay, we're gonna have a BFP meeting before the council meeting.
No, I'm sorry, the council meeting this Friday.
That was my question. Yeah. So
I'll amend my motion to identify this as a recommendation to the council.
Yeah.
Second.
I think that was Michael. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. So assuming that's the correct motion, just one more time from Stoyan and Dustin. Is there any discussion on that motion to move the whole as a recommendation to the full council? Okay. Quickly, just make sure we still have quorum. Can we take roll call, please, in that?
Yeah, give me one moment.
Sorry to slow everyone down.
All right, starting with the building tag. Todd Bayreuther.
Aye.
And Charles Calvano.
Aye.
Susan Kaufman.
Aye.
Mark Sniffen. Sean Karlstrom. Bill Mybush.
Aye.
Corey Thomas.
Aye.
Chris Seaman.
Aye.
Roger Hiringa.
Aye.
Michael Barth.
Aye.
And that concludes for the building code tag. And I was doing a roll call for attendance. I apologize for calling Todd on that one. And
Oh,
then
I didn't catch it. Thanks.
yes. For the fire code tag, Zach Tuck.
Yes.
Quinn Ty.
Aye.
Corey Thomas. Ken Brulette.
Aye.
Mike Six. Or sorry, not here. Dave Cocott.
Aye.
Chris Seaman.
Aye.
Ricky Campbell.
Aye.
Roger Hiringa.
Aye.
And Hal Spalding.
Aye. And just Dustin, I'm actually on the building code tag and I'm just filling in for Paul on the fire code tag, but
I gotcha.
one eye is good.
Cool. So we got a pass on the fire and we had some absent people who were here earlier. Is Mark Sniffen not in the room anymore? I don't see him. Sean Carlstrom. I see him in here. I didn't get a vote from you. Sean, did you want to put a vote in for the pass of this?
Okay,
And we have a pass on both of those.
okay. Okay, well, thank you. With that then, appreciate everyone's time and expertise. And I think with that, we can adjourn. So,
Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, appreciate it.